Okay, we're back to week 27. This is ELA now. I think this is Thursday's lesson, where we're going to introduce the concept of anti-Semitism. So, action. We've been studying World War II, and from World War II, we put a magnifying glass on the Holocaust and the way that Jewish people, not only Jewish people, but basically everyone that didn't match Hitler's idea of the perfect Aryan in terms of mental health, physical health, age was taken into consideration, gender was taken into consideration, sexual preference was taken into consideration, and those were life and death issues. It's not always life and death, though, when we talk about persecution and discrimination. So we've talked about discrimination before in this class. We did this when we studied, remember, the United Nations publication of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and how that applies to guaranteeing certain liberties for all people. If you remember, what was the second of, we looked at 30 different rights, and most of us used the second right as an argumentative essay last trimester. And what was the second one? Don't discriminate. Very good. In common language, it basically says that you can't discriminate based on race, class, gender, anything. And that everyone throughout the world should be given that protection. Does the United Nations always do a great job of protecting these rights? Not always, because they don't, but that's a larger conversation. But discrimination is what we want to focus on today, because today we want to make that connection between the discrimination that we looked at, for instance, in the Dominican Republic with Haiti, people of Haitian descent, and connect that to what Jewish people experienced, not just in Nazi Germany, but even today. And our word of the day is anti-Semitism. Say anti-Semitism, 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 anti-Semitism. How many claps is that? Good, whatever you said. We're just going to stick with Semitism. Anyway, and what that means is discrimination against Jewish people. Let's have somebody read the definition that's provided in the packet. It says that anti-Semitism is a form of prejudice or discrimination that includes hatred, distrust, injustice, or unfair treatment directed towards Jews. Now, the question that we're starting with below that says, have you ever seen or heard examples of anti-Semitism? Describe what happened on the lines below. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to take 90 seconds for you to answer that question as fully as you can. If, though, after about 30 seconds, you're like, I really can't think of any time, I want you to really investigate, but if you can't think of any time that you've seen discrimination against Jewish people, just try to write down an example of discrimination against some group that you've witnessed ever in your life, okay? And then we're going to have a conversation about that. So take your 90 seconds and go. And we're back. Okay, so let's hear some examples. Hands up if you thought of a good example of discrimination, persecution that you've witnessed before. Okay, go, and we get some examples there. And, okay, so what I'm hearing from some people is that even though the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was published, what was it, 1948, I think I told you, and that World War II happened so long ago, and look, we all hear these stories about Nazi Germany, and raise your hand if you find them disgusting, and appalling, and horrible. Right. So we're all in agreement there. So there's no more racism? There's no more persecution? There's no more discrimination now? Because we've learned from our mistakes, right? That's the world that we would like to live in. Unfortunately, we don't live in that world. So we still see examples of anti-Semitism today. People are discriminated against because of their sexuality. Look at our example of Rick and white balloons that we're studying in ELAW. There we see discrimination based on sexuality. Anti-Semitism, though, to bring it back, is discrimination against Jewish people. So let's look at our heroine of the day, because this is a perfect example of the term that we're studying. So who is our heroine of the day? Someone raises their hand and says, Anne Frank. It says teen writer. Raise your hand if you've heard of Anne Frank. I've done this before with you people, and I remember not seeing very many hands, which is really cool because I'm honored to be the first person to share the story of Anne Frank with you. You're going to probably read this. I think most people read this in high school. Anne Frank was a victim of the Holocaust, but she very famously had her diary published. And so when you read the diary of Anne Frank, which again you probably will, you're going to get an inside look not only into like her character, but what it was like to be a young person going through living in Nazi Germany, then going into hiding, and eventually she was captured and sent to a concentration camp where she was eventually put to death. Let's have someone read the background. Someone reads that she was born in 1929, lived in Amsterdam. Now, let's look at the world map for a second. Amsterdam, you'll see, is not actually inside of Germany. But Hitler did this thing, remember, he would take over other territories, and it was imperialism. He took it over to get their resources. And Amsterdam basically was gobbled up by Nazi Germany. And so if you were Jewish living in Amsterdam at the time, you were subject to the same discriminatory anti-Semitic laws as the Nazis were imposing upon their own citizens. Okay.